Hey guys, it's Cody, and this is the Mutant Menace. Now, if you've been following my channel for any amount of time, you may have noticed that I do a little show called Let's Talk About X, in which we look at the X books that just came out for the week. But since House of X and Powers of 10 have kind of replaced everything, Let's Talk About X is going to take a different approach. Thank you so much for all your feedback for the Deconstructing videos, which are more analysis-based, but I thought it'd be cool to do a little show, Let's Talk About X, where I talk more about my personal feelings about the book and how it's done, rather than the imagery and what's going on inside of it. For Deconstructing, I would really like some feedback. The feedback I've gotten has been really great. Thank you guys so much. That said, I'm going to be trying to streamline the process a little bit to kind of save some time. So with that, I wanted to ask you guys what you thought about the recapping segments of the videos. Is the recapping a bit much, and should I focus in on really honing in on the analysis aspect of the videos? Either way, I'll be restructuring how I do it a little bit just to streamline the process, but I wanted to give this kind of format for all of you to give me some input and what you like to see and what you like about the Deconstructing videos in particular. Now, Let's Talk About X is going to be more than just reviews. It's going to differ from the previous Let's Talk About X series in that what I'm going to do is have a comment segment. Everyone has been really supportive and really awesome and vocal about your thoughts, and I love that. And I wanted to give back by responding to some comments that I think have some juice in there that I wanted to really focus on. So please keep commenting, because you will end up on Let's Talk About X, and we're going to kind of open up the dialogue, and hopefully this will be more of a discourse type show, which is going to be really cool. Also, for Let's Talk About X, I wanted to expand on some thoughts that I introduced in the Deconstructing videos. I have a lot of little realizations, little aha moments after the videos are posted, so I thought it'd be cool to have a place to go to where I can touch back with you guys, like a touch base or a follow-up, and expand on some of those ideas where I was like, holy shit, and realize something after the fact. So with that said, let's dive right into the new Let's Talk About X. First up, we're going to dive into the comments. Casey Johnson, I love what you said about having to reread House of X immediately after reading Powers of 10, because that's what I did, and it definitely facilitates rereading. I think we're all going to be doing a lot of reading of the same issue, so it's kind of good that the other issues of X-Men were, got the kibosh for us to focus on this, because it's dense and it's giving us a lot, so I love that, what you mentioned about rereading. Mentioning Elixir having to do with the healing or restoring pods, we now kind of have some context that those pods have to do with the Sinister line and breeding, but that's really interesting because Elixir was pointed out as an Omega level mutant on that page, so Hickman's addressing his presence and his powers, so you may not be too far off. I think we just might be seeing him. I mean, his power is a big deal, and it's a bigger deal than a lot of X-Men books have really dove into. You also mentioned that there's a House of Xavier, but also a House of Magneto. You kind of we're a little bit ahead of Powers of 10 because you left this comment during House of X, but we do see that there's kind of these houses that are clearly working together, but do you think that those two teams, those two clans are going to be as divisive, or as, are they going to butt heads like they do in every other X-Men story we know? We've yet to see. Also, I love what you said about Apocalypse. If you look really small on the bottom of the dossier detailing the surviving mutants in Powers of 10, issue number 1, you'll see in the small print it says Apocalypse build. And it's no coincidence that he's on the surviving mutants page, because hello, survival of the fittest is his whole thing. Will Beatty, you mentioned that people are drawing connections between HoX PoX and Frank Herbert's Dune. I think that's really cool. I have to admit, I've never read Dune. I know, I'm a fake sci-fi fan, but I just think it's really cool people are making connections to other pieces of literature like you did with Cloud Atlas, just talking about the inevitability of these stories over these different time spans or different eras of time, and I think that's so important to talk about the inevitability of things. I mean, even Hickman mentions the evasion, relocation, confrontation cycles of mutants, making it hard to sustain population. I mean, this is his response to Rosenberg calling every X-Men story the same. He's kind of like, yo, you guys realize this cycle happens all the time, and that's kind of what the Sinister line was founded as a response to. So the inevitability of all these things, of this struggle, is super important, especially because in House of X it looks like everything is on the ups, the mutants are making these big money moves, it looks like things are really going to change for them, and then Powers of 10 just comes in here and goes, yeah, shit's gonna be a disaster. It turns everything on its head, and it's just insane to watch that kind of fall happen between just two issues. So how it all comes together and how it happens is going to be really interesting, but I love that you pointed out the inevitability of things, so kudos on that. So Will, you also pointed out something really cool in talking about Silabel. You mentioned that those colors, that costume, is kind of evocative of Marvel Girl, the green and the greens and the yellows being used, which is really, really cool. I made the connections of Hounds and Rachel. That's a kind of a natural conclusion that we X-Men fans draw, but I love that you pointed out the subtlety of that character design. And no, I do not think it's a coincidence. So thanks for pointing that out. Just like another expansion that I wanted to talk about that I made in the background of the fair in the opening of Powers of 10, you'll see in the crowd this young girl wearing the yellow dress, and it's very, very evocative of little Maddie Pryor's character design. And that was kind of a realization I had after posting the video. I was like, you know what? That girl in the background, that's something we should talk about, because I don't think that character design is a coincidence. And thank you to Karen on Twitter, Karen X-Men fan. Thank you so much for pointing that out. That, you know, look at these people back here. Let's talk about that, because yes, I totally made the same connection, Karen. I thought of that too. It was crazy. So thanks for bringing that up. Monte Logan says that the music in this video is very fitting. Thank you so much. I write and record all the music in these videos myself, so I always really like it when people are like, hey, this is working. So thank you so much for the feedback on that. You also mentioned that Xavier and Moira are both acting really weird. I agree. And you mentioned, you know, Sinister being involved, or something Sinister would do. And I have to say, now that we know that clones are like part of this whole thing, everything has to be taken with a grain of salt. Once clones are introduced in something, all bets are off. We really have to ask if what we're seeing is what we should be believing. Same goes for when Mystique is around, which leads me to an expansion I made. A thought that I had after I had already posted this video was that Mystique was there during a scene where Cyclops comes back to retrieve Sabretooth after the Fantastic Four have captured him. And in my head, I was just like, or did he? Have we actually even seen Cyclops yet in this story? Because Mystique was in that same scene. And when Mystique's around, you really got to pay attention for little discrepancies and things that feel off. Because if they feel really off, they probably are. But also, clones are part of this story, so Mystique may not have been involved in how weird Scott was acting at all, because Cyclops is acting real weird. He was super easy breezy, and Scott's a pretty uptight guy about almost everything. So we kind of had to ask what was going on there. So I love that you mentioned, you know, Sinister being present and how things feel weird, because yes, everything feels weird, and that's one of the expansions I made about Mystique being in that scene, so thanks for pointing that out. That was cool. So another expansion I wanted to make on the Deconstructing videos was the Adam and Eve imagery running rampant throughout these stories. I never explicitly, you know, talked about how it's very Adam and Eve, but the opening scene of House of X with the clones of Jean and Scott coming out of the pods, what we assume to be clones of them anyway, it's very evocative of first man and first woman, especially in the mutant world, as they kind of reach for the godlike figure that is Xavier, and there's even the massive tree of Krakoa he's standing before. It's all very Book of Genesis, and then it appears again at the end of Powers of 10, issue number 1, where we see the man and woman in the preserve in the future during the Ascension. It's also very evocative of first man and first woman, this time of human world. Or, you know, it's almost like the last man and the last woman, though, based on the context of that story. So the Adam and Eve imagery is running rampant. The biblical imagery is running rampant. If anybody out there has really, really deep understanding or has studied the Bible and Bible stories, please comment, please contribute, because I would love to hear more about that. My knowledge of the Bible is more just what I've gleaned from culture and what I've taken, you know, the time to learn myself. I'm not a religious person, like, at all, so I don't have that deep kind of, like, I haven't dug deep into the symbolism and the imagery of all the Bible stories, and I don't think those are going anywhere. Hickman seems to concern himself a lot with Bible references in these stories, Cardinal being one of them, and that leads me into talking about Cardinal, actually. Cardinal being on the Devil card, I was talking about how it was kind of weird because he was lacking a lot of the imagery used on the Devil card traditionally, and also how Cardinal as a character in that story is very straight-laced, and, you know, he runs the straight and narrow. But I want to talk about how the caption on the Devil card that Cardinal appears on the Devil Arcana, it very implicitly says the Lost Cardinal of the Last Religion. Now, referring to him as the Lost Cardinal kind of made me realize, oh shit, he's probably going to fall to some kind of temptation or fall to some kind of corruption. So his being placed on the Devil card might make a lot more sense. I did mention in that video that these characters are new to us. We're still learning about them. We know almost nothing about them. And the story is so young that anything could happen. But that made me realize, oh, that was more foreshadowing, wasn't it? So I think we might be seeing that. Which leads me also to thank you to Kurt Clark for coming in here and leaving a comment this morning. I made this connection with Cardinal, and you clearly did too, and thanks for coming in here and pointing that out, and also clarifying some things about the Magician being, you know, in addition to the kind of interpretation that I expand on in Deconstructing, you mentioned that the magician could also represent the first steps on a journey, much like the fool does. But you mentioned that it's like the early steps on a journey, but with more purpose and more dedication than the fool. And I love that. I think that's very much more conducive to Rasputin as a character. So thanks for adding that. Thank you so much for commenting, Kurt. I was so glad to see you in the comments because I knew that you are knowledgeable about the tarot. So I really, really appreciate you contributing. Please come back on in when things like this happen because I loved that comment. That totally like made my day. So thank you so much for that. Now I wanted to talk a little bit about my personal feelings about the book in general, the storytelling aspect. This is a story that drops us right into the middle of it. Hickman really throws us in, and it's really, really cool. I love stories that can do that, where there's clearly developments that have happened, you know, off panel, previous to the events in the story. I love when a writer can do that and make it not confusing. Like, you're not very confused or overwhelmed. At least I wasn't. I thought it was pretty damn accessible for how much he's reinventing everything. And to help with that, he has these dossiers planted throughout the issues, just kind of interjected there. That's something that I can very easily see some people not liking. Dropping exposition dumps like that can come off as lazy to a lot of people, or just like people want to be shown rather than told, especially in a visual medium like comic books are, and I totally understand that. And that's a big reason why I don't think this is going to be for everyone. A, because it drops you right in when there's clearly developments that have already happened, and B, it does have these little exposition dumps in the form of these formal system files and dossiers, which might turn off a lot of people. I love that kind of thing. I think exposition dumps can be very, very distracting, but Hickman has 6 issues to tell, you know, respectively. Between these two, there's 12, but he has 6 issues each to tell these really grand stories, and for that reason, I feel like these dossiers are almost welcome. I eat them up. I love them. I love being a sponge for that information because it's given in a way that's intriguing and just wild and mysterious, and there's so much mystery going on, and I think that's what keeps them from being distracting or off-putting to me. But like I said, I can see why that wouldn't be for everyone. But I think it's very accessible for people trying to get into X-Men, because let's face it, this is one of the least confusing things in terms of X-Men continuity. He's saying, I'm building a world right now, jump in. And if you haven't been reading X-Men for a while, jump in right now, because it's going to be too late soon and you're going to have too much information thrown at you. If you join this party that we're having, us on X-Men Twitter, we don't know what the fuck is going on. We're all just guessing. Your guess is as good as ours, so that's a beautiful time for you to jump in. And I love that about this story. I love that it's just reinventing fearlessly. Hickman is really going for it here, and personally I love that. And the fact that some of the dossiers are put into the book after this terminology has already been used, like we're just thrown into these stories of these characters that we've never seen before in Powers of 10, and in House of X's case, characters that are acting differently, and then the dossiers might be thrown in after something has already happened. So now you read the dossier and you're like, oh, and you're starting to understand. And that's why these books facilitate the rereads, because the dossiers come later. And to me, that adds a real air of mystery, and I think that's fascinating. It keeps you on your toes. This is the kind of storytelling I've been craving. It's high concept sci-fi, and the X-Men have needed this facelift, and I'm so glad it's here. So I'm having a great time with the storytelling in general. I wanted to talk about the characters and how they seem off and strange. I wanted to point out the significance of the heroes all feeling a little bit weird and different, and the villains, or the villainous characters traditionally, are all feeling pretty on brand. Magneto's tirades are all very Magneto. The Cuckoos being the way they are is pretty consistent with how the Cuckoos have always been. They even bickered with each other a little bit. They're pretty damn consistent. The heroes feel off. Cyclops feels easy breezy and Stepfordy. Xavier just feels creepy as all hell. And I think it's important to point out that while the villains feel consistent, the heroes feel different. And that makes the heroes, the X-Men, look sinister, ominous. It makes it feel creepy and unsettling. And I think that's really, really cool. And I'm really, really excited. To talk a little bit about the art, Pepe Larraz on House of X and R.B. Silva on Powers of 10, they're both just killing it. They're doing brilliant work. Larraz's work adds a little bit of sophistication to the title, which is super important based on the scale of Hickman's story. His lines are clean. His faces are expressive without ever getting too cartoony, and I think that's awesome. Marte Gracia's colors on House of X are just great. It's super shiny, and it feels he makes the book look as shiny and new as Hickman's concepts feel, and I think it's super important that these books look brand new and feel fresh, and Marte Gracia is the colorist that's going to come here and do it in all his shiny lens flary glory. Some might say it's a little bit much, a little bit dramatic, but I happen to love it. I think it's very appropriate. I think this is a strong, solid team on House of X. And on Powers of 10, RB Silva's here with the lines. The lines are very clean, much like Pepe Larraz's lines are, but his style is much more animated. It's more animated without ever looking too incredibly cartoony. It's kind of cartoony in some places, but it really works. Talk about expressive. His faces are fantastic. This is the book, though, that Marte Gracia's colors are a little bit perplexing to me. He comes in here and does some things with flesh tones, and some of these characters in the face look like the coloring gets kind of weird, and the gradient looks a little bit sickly and strange. It's a little bit distracting to me because I look at all the colors in one person's face, and it's kind of strange, but nevertheless, these books pop, and Marte Gracia is, like I said, the colorist that's going to come in here and make everything look as shiny as it needs to feel when we're dealing with such high concepts, brand new themes. So overall, the books both look incredibly strong. So let me know, what did you think about what I've said in this video? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Tell me what you think about the deconstructing videos so far. Do you like that I dig deep into the recapping, or do you want me to just focus on analysis? Either way, I'll be streamlining it a bit more, but I really want your input on that. What do you think about this format for Let's Talk About X during HoX PoX? Do you like that I'm engaging with you a bit more and involving the comments in here? Let me know. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more content, and say it with me. We are the Mutant Menace. See you guys later.
Hey, hey.